Cuckoo, Kachoo, everybody, Coach Rab here. I'm going to deliver you a nutrition lesson based on set point theory. Now, this is one of my favorites and I geek out on it all the time, but because of the format today, I can use a bit more visuals and make it hopefully explain it in a more clear manner. So, set point theory is fundamentally why short-term diets don't work. The majority of what I'm going to explain is actually fact. There's one element that makes it theory, hence the theory, but again, that part isn't too important because that's to do with timing, and ultimately if you follow everything that I'm going to recommend, then the rest won't matter. So first and foremost, it comes down to fat cells. So everybody has the same sized fat cells, okay? I have the same size fat cells as you, you've got the same fat cells as your neighbor, and so on and so forth. It's the number of fat cells that you have in your body that makes you have a higher body fat percentage than the next person, if that's the case, or less body fat percentage. Now, at any period in our life, if we overconsume calories, so if calories in is vastly exceeding calories out, then your body will prime to store fat. You know, in the whole hunter-gatherer sense of the word, the human body has this excess energy and it saves it for a rainy day. It doesn't know when a potential famine might come along. Now, there are set periods in your life when your body's more primed to make more fat cells. So, puberty, early adolescence, pregnancy, these sorts of things, menopause, where the body's just saying it's in the right kind of conditions to make more fat cells to store for that rainy day. So there are periods, if you overeat during those periods, you're more susceptible to gaining fat cells. But fundamentally, anybody can increase their body fat by consuming more calories than they're burning off at any given period of time. Medication can trigger it too. Now, when you consume more body fat, you end up accumulating more body fat cells, and you'll end up staying, assuming you then get to a point where your movement and your exercise and your calories balance out. Now, most of us, for periods of time, and again it changes, but most of us will hover around a set weight for any period of time. Like, there was a period in my life I was always 12 stone. Whether I ate more, I used to go up to 12 and a half, and then the days I wasn't eating less, I'd spring back to 12. And at that time in my life, my set point was 12 stone based on my muscle mass and the number of fat cells I had. And then over time, you know, I've managed to bulk up and get bigger and all these kind of things. But in recent years, my set point was sitting at 15 stone. So if I then embarked on a diet plan and lowered body fat, I might go down to the low 14s. And then what would happen is if I went back to normal eating, I'd spring back to 15. And that's because my set point was sitting around 15 stone, because the analogy I'm going to use is cups. So imagine there's cups all over a table, and that is your fat cells. And as I explained at the start, everybody's fat cells are exactly the same size. It's the number of fat cells you have. So when you embark on a weight loss plan or weight management or whatever you're approaching, you start to empty those fat cells, right? So visualize those cups getting the fluid poured out of them, but the cups are still there, right? They're still there. The fat cells are still there in your system. They're just sitting empty. And then you might do really, really well over a 2 to 3 week period, and you might drop yourself 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pounds. You're like, yeah, great. And then guess what happens? You go back to normal eating. Your normal eating and normal habits might then just start to fill those fat cells back up, and you spring back to the weight that you started with at the beginning. And you can, and this is very, very common, you can be, you can fall into the habit of thinking, what is the point? I worked really, really hard for 2 or 3 weeks, drop the body fat, and then it just springs back to normal. And the problem is when people work really, really hard, sometimes they embark too quick, too soon. You know, they make so many changes that they ultimately can't maintain. You know, they're getting up at silly o'clock in the morning, working really hard, and training in the afternoon and running in the evening and doing too much. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, they realize they get tired, they get stressed, they realize they can't keep it up, and then they relax for a bit and the weight springs back on and they feel defeated because they're thinking, well, I can't maintain that life that I was doing to lose the weight, or the perceived life. And then the minute they stop again, the weight comes piling back on, so they get defeated and they give up and they sack it. But where the magic comes in is that if the fat cell remains empty long enough, it shrivels up and goes dormant. Now, this is really, really important. So short-term diets don't work. All these detox in 7 days and 10 days and all these low carb things that take advantage of the relationships between carbohydrates and water and all that jazz. The short term ones don't work. So anything that's arguably saying, yes, I'll do this in 7 days, 10 days, that nonsense you read in magazines, bin it, don't follow it. You're better making sustainable change I'm not against going low carb, but you need to do things that you'd sustain over a longer period of time. The reason for that is that a certain magic happens if you can keep that fat cell empty long enough. Now, where the theory comes in is how long that cell has to remain empty for before it shrivels up. Now, they say it's anywhere between 3 and 6 months. Now, that can be quite demoralizing. You think, oh my God, 3 to 6 months. But if you think about it this way, the weight you lose on week one could be permanently, well, we say dormant, so nothing's permanent, but let's just say for the arguments of this video, permanently gone by week 12. The weight you lose on week 2, permanently gone by week 13. The weight you lose on week 3, permanently gone by week 14, and so on. So it's a knock-on effect. So that's my way of saying is, like, if you embark on a weight loss plan and you mentally say, right, I'm going to do 12 weeks, whatever you lose by the 12-week mark, right, if you can just keep certain habits going and keep ticking over, once you've got the weight off, every week that you keep that weight off, you're a week closer to it staying off. So then when you get to week 12, remind yourself, well, what did I lose on week 1? 2-3 pounds, whatever it did. I mean, some of that will be fluid, we know that. But let's just say, for argument's sake, 2-3 pounds, you're like, oh, that's that 2 to 3 pounds, very, very likely gone for good unless you severely overate. So it's not going to come back. Then you get another week. Now, your weight might stay the same by this point, but that's another week that you've kept it off, and more fat cells will have gone dormant. Now, a lot of the clients I work with, when I've told them this lesson, they love it because then they realize, all right, that makes sense, because it means you can celebrate the weeks when you don't necessarily lose any weight, because you won't lose weight every single week. In the beginning, yes, but there'll be periods where like the weight hovers. If it hovers, that's another week closer to your weight loss being permanently gone. And then what they tend to find is that when they even go back to normal eating or habits, and granted they will hopefully install better habits by that point, their weight has absolutely adjusted. So when, if I was using myself, if I was setting at 15 stone as my set point, I could adjust it to 14, go about my normal daily habits and stay at 14, based on the number of active fat cells. So that is set point theory. So the number of fat cells, the active fat cells in your body, is what makes you either larger or smaller from a body fat percentage than the next person. If you, when you exercise and eat well, you will empty those fat cells. If you keep those fat cells empty long enough, they will shrivel up and go dormant. And the only part that's theory is like how long they have to remain empty for before they go dormant. I personally think it's linked with insulin. Insulin's a builder hormone. So if you cut sugars out and limit the insulin coming in, I suspect they would shrivel up and go dormant far sooner. If you had a diet, even if the calories were low, but they were made up of a lot of sugars, you'd be triggering a lot of insulin. And that, in my opinion, would be triggering these fat cells to take longer to go dormant. But regardless, set point theory is a reminder that short-term diets don't work, okay? Or they work short-term, but you want to be thinking long-term. Set point theory is the reminder that when you're slogging away and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. Yes, you are. Because under the microscope, your fat cells will be emptying and some of those fat cells will be shriveling up and going dormant. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. So just persevere, work hard, keep pushing on. And any weeks that your weight stays the same, whilst it's not ideal, look at it and just say, well, that's another week that I kept all this weight that I've lost off, and that's a week closer to being, I say permanent gone, but we established this, they're dormant. They could get triggered again if we severely started overeating, but hopefully with the habits you would install, that wouldn't happen. So set point theory, short-term diets don't work, so any changes you decide to make sure it's for the long term. Make sure it's for you, that it's sustainable, and that you can maintain at least for 3 months, and then hopefully the majority of the habits again for a further 3 months to get all your 3 months losses sustained for another 3, and so on.